measures that you're doing. Then the cycle begins again. You start looking again at how your students are performing and figuring out the goals and objectives, and you continue with that cycle throughout the duration of your school year. Let's go back for a moment to the teacher self-report. Different districts do this differently, so I'm going to give a global explanation for how this should take place. The teacher self-report allows you an opportunity to reflect on things that you've done throughout the school year when you're completing sections 2 and 3. And it allows you to set those goals and objectives that I discussed earlier when you're looking at section 1. We know that you're going to be teaching all of the texts as you go throughout your year, because you know that that is a requirement at the state level and a requirement so that you can make sure that your students are successful on all of the assessment measures being used. What you need to do on this section 1 is to look at the different areas, reading, writing, math, science, and social studies, and address those objectives that you are going to focus on as a result of looking at your needs assessment information from your classroom, or possibly as you look at the campus performance. You're going to be making decisions about how can I best help implement those goals. Perhaps your entire campus is doing math objectives. You might want to focus on some of those as you're going throughout the year. For those of you sitting in the audience who are speech teachers, possibly music, physical education, you might be wondering how exactly you're supposed to do all of this information. Special ed teachers, pre-K teachers, you may be wondering the same things. Let me tell you that your campus administrator can assist in this measure by letting you know what their expectations for this TSR Section 1 would be. Some possible suggestions: you're going to tie into the campus goals. If you teach speech or drama or anything like that, you may be able to allow your students to write their speeches out, and you will be focusing on some of the writing goals. If you're doing drama, to allow them to write their own script could be a great example. When you're looking at music, you're looking at beats, and you may be able to tie in some of the math skills that you're using there. Pre-kindergarten teachers, yours may be completely different, but you're still focusing on reading skills for the future. There's a section, question number 2, that deals specifically with ACT and SAT scores, or possibly AP scores. You could take a moment to just highlight some of the things that you feel you need to focus on based on some of the readiness skills information that you have available to you. Special education teachers, an example of how Section 1 might be different for you is you might be focusing on some of the IEP goals as are directed and placed for each of your students, and putting that under question 2. If I'm teaching AP classes, my goal may be to get the scores up to 4s or 5s for all of my students. What are going to be some things that I do in order to make sure that I get there? Maybe it entails meeting with the students on Fridays for a lunch study group. Maybe I'm going to spend a month and a half prior to the AP test just doing some reviews and different activities on Saturday mornings. Spend some time thinking through step 1. There are lines there that say all objectives. If you teach ELA and your administrator says that's fine to just check all objectives for reading and writing, then certainly follow whatever procedures they've outlined for you at your campus. Ideally, it'd be great if you made it more specific to specific needs that you see on your campus. Section 2 again ties in directly to how are you monitoring and assessing some of the things that are taking place as it relates to students that are failing, students in at-risk situations. One key component of that is to understand what the 13 criteria are for your at-risk students. If you're not familiar with the criteria for your at-risk students, it would be a good idea to get a copy of what those are. I will try to include a copy of that for each of the superintendents when I send out this DVD. You should, as a classroom teacher, have a copy of all of the students who have been identified as at-risk students in your classroom. You won't have them for who your neighbor has, but you will have them for your own. As you get these, take a moment to look at why this student was identified as an at-risk student. Is it because they have been retained at one point? Is it because they're pregnant or a parent? Is it because they're in some type of foster care situation? Or maybe they've been suspended or expelled in the preceding or the current school year. It could be because they're a homeless student. As you look through the information, find out why and figure out ways that you can help that student to be successful. Our whole goal as administrators is to make certain that these students do not drop out of school, therefore fulfilling the at-risk label that has been given to them. As you look at the self-report section 2 and you complete that, all of that information will be used, as I mentioned earlier, to tie into Domain 8. The section 3 will tie into your professional development. In this, you'll be listing specifics as to what professional development you've attended throughout this school year and what the dates were and how many hours you received. The next part of this section 3 will ask you to go ahead and identify what you learned at those professional development trainings that you plan to then utilize and implement within your classroom. The last part of section 3 for the teacher self-report has you go through and identify 3 areas that you would like to focus on for the next year. This is a great opportunity for you to figure out some things that you really feel would benefit you in helping students be successful. Perhaps the following year there's going to be a national Title I conference in Houston, and that would be a great opportunity for you to figure out good techniques to work with students who are not meeting the state standards. Visit with your administrators about some of your goals and why you think that those would be